Call.
Glenn,
Here.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Esbro is absent, Commissioner Rubio is absent, Commissioner Kendig online, Commissioner Glaschen,
Present.
Commissioner Scoggin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any additions or changes to the agenda? All right. Any objection to approving the agenda as written? Hearing, seeing none, the agenda is approved. Mr. Bradway, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
All right. On the consent agenda, we have the regular meeting minutes from May 16th, 2022, and an introduction for public hearing, legislative matters, Resolution PC 22-20, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Planning Commission recommending the Assembly adopt the Beverly Lake Lake Management Plan and an ordinance amending MSB 17.59 for Lake Management Plan implementation. The public hearing will be, for that matter, will be on June 20th. Staff is Kelsey Anderson. All right. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda as written? Hearing and seeing none, consent agenda is approved. All right. So we are on to public hearings, legislative matters. Resolution PC 22-13, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Planning Commission recommending Assembly adoption of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough 2022 Official Streets and Highway Plan. Staff, Mr. Bradway, would you please give us a presentation?
Take a second to set this up and hope that it works.
Sorry, I skipped ahead a bit. So we'll have some time to get that figured out. Yeah, okay, so we skipped audience participation. So anyone here that would like to speak for something that is not on tonight's agenda will have 3 minutes to speak. And again, this is for anything not on the agenda tonight, which consists of PC 22-13 and PC 22-18. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak for 3 minutes on any topic that they would like? Is there anyone online? All right. Is there any objection to closing audience participation? Hearing and seeing none, audience participation is closed. All right. Now let's get on with the presentation.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for having me. My name is Adam Bradway. I'm a planner in the borough's long-range planning division. With me tonight is Kim Solian, the manager of that division. And we also worked with Kinney Engineering on this plan update. So what's going to be in front of you tonight is a resolution of support for the update of the Official Streets and Highways Plan. This plan was last updated in 2007. Also, I'm a little congested, so if you need me to repeat anything, please just let me know. I am going to go over a sort of high-level overview of the plan process, and what it does. And so I'll just move right along. If you have any questions, there will be time at the end, or if you have a pressing question, just let me know. So the borough has been growing very rapidly. It's projected to continue growing. And with all that growth come lots of homes and lots of new cars on the road that we need to plan for. Those new cars bring with them many transit issues or transportation issues, such as congestion, safety issues, and just general lack of network connectivity. So the borough as a whole has transportation as one of its main goals. So in the borough's long-range comprehensive plan, which is the goals of the entire borough community, there are lots of goals about transportation. And then there's even a very direct need to identify needed public infrastructure in the Assembly's 2022 strategic plan. So that brings us to, something, sorry about that.
I disconnect on there. I'm not sure.
It seems to be. Technology is always.
Saw it like flash on the screen, so it might be your connection. For those that are listening, we're experiencing some technical difficulties at the podium. We're just a moment here.
Apologies. We'll pick up where I left off, which is the official streets and highways plan.
This is Bill. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. We're picking it back up on the slide that
Hello.
says, what is an OSHIP?
Bill, we can hear you.
So the official streets and highways plan, or OSHIP, is a roadmap for where roads are going to be needed in the borough. Essentially, it's a map that identifies future road connections and road upgrades that are going to be necessary to safely and efficiently accommodate our growing population and its transportation needs. Some of the big picture goals of the OSHIP are to promote safe and efficient travel, to reduce traffic congestion, to lower road project costs by planning ahead, and to improve quality of life overall. So the OSHIP is just a piece of the larger road building process. And where it fits in is big picture goals come from the community at the comprehensive plan level. More specifically for transportation is the long range transportation plan, which has sort of big picture policy goals for transportation in the borough. The long range transportation plan includes transit, bike and pedestrian, and also roads. A little bit more specifically is where we're at right now is the official streets and highways plan, which is essentially this map of where all the roads are going to be needed in the borough as we continue to build out and develop. So this is laying sort of very rough alignments of where all those roads might be needed if that area gets developed more thoroughly. From there, those projects, those roads are taken off that official streets and highways plan or long-range transportation plan and put onto project lists like a road bond or the RIP list, which is the road improvement projects list. Somewhere along the way, they need to get funded and prioritized. Often there are more studies, so the OSHIP doesn't have like perfect alignments. They need to be studied in more depth and designed, and then ultimately the roads get constructed. So some big picture road planning. So I'm going to talk briefly about what the OSHIP update created. The first thing are connectivity recommendations. So those are those new roads that are going to be needed. The second item are functional classifications, which is essentially what types of roads are we going to need in this idealized road network. And then primary intersections, which are what are the key intersections along our roadway. So we'll see if this plays. The short video talking about connectivity. Sound. Okay. We will skip that and talk about connectivity generally. So connectivity is the thought that roads should connect into each other to form a more complete network. This is really easy to see with an example like the one here. This is Texel Drive. So there are two sides of Texel, and if you've ever driven down them, you'll know that if you're on one side of Texel on the east side, and this is in the Fishhook area. So Palmer Fishhook is on the right in this map, and Wasilla Fishhook's on the left. And if you lived on one end and right now drove all the way around, it would take about 13 minutes to meet your family member or friend that lives on the other end. In this particular case, we are solving this problem with the road bond that the community passed this year. But this is all over the borough, maybe not in quite this drastic of an issue. But we've built a lot of subdivisions without building in these connection points and these collector level roads. So the solution with the official streets and highways plan, as you can see, is to build in more of these collector level roads, which I'll talk a little bit more about, which are connecting in the different neighborhoods, and then more connections in general lead to more choice for transportation. So drivers can choose different routes to go, and ultimately more dispersed traffic. So functional classification, like I said, are what type of road are we going to need? Roads range from local roads, which are the ones that probably your houses are on, all the way up to interstates, which have controlled access and interchanges. So these are some sort of rough approximations and examples. Generally, the lower classifications of road are lower speed, more access points, more driveways. As you get higher and higher up, you want fewer access points because you want traffic to flow through quickly, and you want to allow users to drive safely at higher speeds. And then the third deliverable that we created with this plan were primary intersections. So these are, we drew these in on arterial level roads, which are some of those higher level roads, because these are the ones that we want to really make sure that we're getting the access points right so that traffic can flow freely. So if you imagine that this is the Palmer-Wasilla Highway, this is actually a really good example of all of these deliverables at once. So this map is showing the Palmer-Wasilla Highway in between Trunk Road and the Glen Highway. So how the OSHIP, well, I guess we'll start with functional classification. So this is meant to be an arterial level road, which just means it's meant to move traffic quickly from one place to another. If you've ever driven on it at rush hour, you know that that's not always the way it actually functions. So first of all, we designated it as an arterial to show that when we're designing projects there, we want them to encourage it to function at that level. So second, we're drawing in new connections. So what I have circled here is a backage road that if you lived in this neighborhood and there was some sort of holdup on the Palmer-Wasilla, you could take that and go around it. So it gives you more connectivity options. And then a primary intersection is really what the Palmer-Wasilla Highway needed all along, was to designate some of these intersections so that you don't have so many conflicting traffic points. So went over what the OSHIP is and what we've created here. I'll quickly go through the process. If you need more details, let me know. So through this process, we worked with a team from DOT, the City of Palmer, lots of staff members from the borough, City of Wasilla, and the school district to help sort of vet some of these more technical details that we've been working on. So the first thing that we did in creating this plan was look at what already exists on the landscape. That includes existing roads, wetlands and water bodies. We really don't want to build roads through wetlands and water bodies if we can help it. Topography, things like that. We also looked at some of those existing lists. If the borough already is intending on their road bond to build a road at some point, we want to include that. And then existing plans, like I said, the 2007 OSHIP has a lot of these roads already on it. We wanted to go in and take those into account as well. And then things like our comprehensive plans. And then this is a forward-looking plan. This is looking all the way out into our development horizon to say, where are we going to need roads in the future? So we had to look out into the future with a growth study. We looked at generally how much population do we think we're going to take on from now until we're built out. This map here is an example of using the Anchorage NPO has a travel demand model, which helped us to spread that expected population out across the landscape so we have a better idea of where that population is going to go. And then we also removed land that we know isn't going to get developed. So this map, the tan areas are areas that could be developed. And this is, again, the fishhook area. And then all those colored have some sort of constraint, whether it's they already have a building on them or they're designated as a conservation easement or something. So we pulled all those out. And what it's left with are these maps. The darker colors are more dense development in the future, and this is a little skewed based on how big the different shapes are here. But this is essentially saying is population is going to move west, and it's going to move southwest as we start to fill up the areas in the core area of the borough that we know are going to grow the fastest right now. And then this is employment. So generally going along major routes and major nodes, so like cities. And what those things allowed us to do is draw the maps that are in your packet, which essentially are, if this area gets developed, what roads will they need? You might notice that some of these bigger roads, like the Knick Arm Crossing or some of these bypasses, are not included on this map. The reasoning behind that is most of these projects are such large projects that if they were to occur, if they got a little bit further into, they actually had funding or had some design started, we would probably need to go in and update the official streets and highways plan anyways, because they would drastically change the network. And then sort of lastly, I want to talk about, well, what's the point of this plan? How is it actually used? First of all, when the borough's designing roads or when we are looking at subdivision applications for new roads, we want to make sure that they're intersecting our existing roads at the appropriate locations. So again, we don't end up with situations like the Palmer-Wasilla Highway So we allow traffic to flow through our arterial level roads well. One of the next steps from this, and this is also in your packet, there's a sort of implementation plan that talks about what we can do to further these larger goals. One of them is to start standardizing our roads. We don't have one design manual for how to build a road in the borough. We have multiple, and we are intending to change that, or potentially create a design criteria manual for when we build our borough roads to make sure that they look like an arterial, like a collector level road, so they all have consistent design. And then really the largest way that this is implemented is through our subdivision process. So there's a section of the borough's subdivision construction manual, which you'll also be talking about tonight, that says that the new development shouldn't conflict with the official streets and highways plan. And the way that works is we end up discussing with developers when they come forward with some sort of subdivision, and we work with them to help preserve the right of way for these roads. It's really in everybody's best interest. That way, we're saving money when we don't have to go and acquire the houses that end up getting built, and they are providing for roads that help to move the traffic from their subdivisions. So a good example of this is this Valley Ridge subdivision that we worked with a developer on recently. He was in the room earlier. And so what's circled here is through this conversation, they created a building setback so that this road corridor could be realized sometime in the future. So there's a building setback where the green line is, but they also dedicated open space, and then I believe even dedicated part right of way on one side. And so this is what that corridor would look like. And if they had not done those things, you could have ended up with multiple 1 acre lots with houses running straight through that corridor that would have to get acquired, and then somebody's house might be taken from them at some point if that road ever became that much of a necessity. So briefly, our public involvement process, we've spoken to the Road Service Area Board, the Transportation Advisory Board, and the Planning Board. They've all signed resolutions of support. The Planning Board added an amendment to make sure that that right-of-way process we discussed is being done in a legal way, and we talked with our borough attorney's office to make sure that that's appropriate and implemented that. We're now here at the Planning Commission, and then we'll go to the Assembly very soon, hopefully in the next month or so. General public comment was from February 16th of this year to March 31st of this year, and that was done through a project page, which I'm happy to share with you. It's still up and running. And on that page, we had a map that users could go and drop a pin on wherever they wanted to comment so they could speak directly. Overall, we had about 1,700 interactions and 31 direct comments. So hopefully that means that most of those people were satisfied. Briefly, the general themes were there are quite a few comments that were generally opposed to any new roads in their area. So what I'll say to those is we didn't actually implement those general opposition comments. This is a planning document, and so there are lots more steps in the road building process, and there's no reason not to plan for these roads. This, again, is looking potentially way out into the future, and it's better to have the idea of where that road might be now, and if the community doesn't want it or doesn't need it, they can bring that up when it goes further into the road building process and maybe gets prioritized a list. And so we did not include those. We did include many comments that were sort of either alternative alignments or clerical changes. A lot of agencies gave us those kind of comments. One of our Other departments actually let us know that there was a new conservation easement that one of our roads was running through, so we removed that, made some adjustments around wetlands. And then some other comments were based on maintenance or something that we could solve right now. And so we directed them to the appropriate people to speak. And I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a large Excel spreadsheet in your packet that's, we actually directly answered every comment that we received, either sent them a letter or spoke to them directly. And so that's documented in your packet, and I'm happy to talk to any of those as well.
Any comments from, or questions from the commission? Goggin?
Some of your major roads, some of the main roads you're putting up in building now, is there any, they should be built at least 100% during winter. Is that a factor at all for you guys?
I'm not sure if I'm the best person to answer that question. And I'm long range planning, and our public works department could probably answer more specifically about the exactly the design criteria for the different roads that we end up building. All right.
Question. I noticed on the Point McKenzie, there's a big like bypass. It was kind of on a back burner. Is that? That's last weekend. You know, Point McKenzie, our EGB road was closed, and that we're trying to develop a port. I think that might be something that would in the future I should look at, maybe pushing out a little harder. Burma Road, I don't know if you've been over Burma Road, that's not really an alternate for trucks. And I actually came down KGB, and there's a tanker trailer or double trying to unhook, and because we had one road, and that, the port is could become a pretty big thing in the future.
Yeah. So I know that Burma Road, upgrading that substantially is, I think, one of the more recent plans for that area, but there are a lot of developments in that southwestern Matsu region, and if any of those larger developments happened and started moving momentum in that direction, we would need to relook at this for sure.
Any other questions? Commissioner Allen?
Excuse me. When you're doing your work, are you, is it always focused on, basically the logistics of moving the citizenry around from their homes and shopping and that kind of stuff? Or are you ever involved in sort of the, industry roads for logging or mining or oil or whatever it might be? Do you get involved in that aspect as well, or just the sort of residential and commercial stuff?
This plan is meant to take in all uses, so it includes things like transit, or things like freight. So some of those bigger roads, like we just discussed, once there's enough momentum for them to be realized. So one that we left off that's probably the closest is that West Susitna access. But if that actually gets built, it will, again, drastically change the needs of the borough, and we should probably go in and look at this again. And so the old official streets and highways plan was just a paper map. And so it was really hard to go in and update it. The nice thing about this version that we have now is it's more of a living document. We can go in and make those changes a little bit quicker when a new development or a new major industry happens.
Any other questions? Commissioner Kendig, do you have any questions?
Of issues.
No, I don't. Can you hear me now?
We heard you twice.
All right. I'm just having a lot of trouble.
Okay. Did you have any questions for Mr. Bradway?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you. All right, let's open the public hearing for PC 22, Resolution 22-13.
No one signed up.
No one signed up? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this?
Sir, if you don't mind holding your testimony here to you're on the mic here. So if you want to pass whatever you want to pass to the chair.
Sir, one moment, please. Can we get the timer switched over? Okay. All right, please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Bill Tucker, Tucker. I'm representing the Fairview Parks Investors LLC. And what I just handed you is mostly extraneous, it turns out, because all of it is already in your packet, with one exception, and that was the Gateway resolution actually was signed, so you have that now. For what it's worth, that's page 2 of that little packet. The rest of it you already have. In fact, it starts on, if I've got this right. Approximately page 39 of your packet. We've had generated a plan at the request actually of the previous borough administration. Interestingly enough, the guy who made the request, I believe, was sitting behind me there, Mr. Klebesheil. So he's familiar with all this stuff. The question initially was, can you find an access to the school site that is safe? And we did. It happens to be the above grade railroad Fairview crossing, which shows up in this packet. And it stands in the place, or I would like to see it stand in the place of the on-grade access to the Fairview. It turns out that I think the public works part of this system liked what we proposed, but Mr. Duffy didn't. He wanted to see access to the Fairview also. It turns out that in 1985, we had generated a plan for access to the Fairview from functionally the Parks Highway, which would have eliminated the old Matt intersection with the Fairview and would have been an above grade crossing, eliminating the 45-degree angle railroad crossing of the Fairview at that point. So we put them together, and that's what you see here. Am I echoing now suddenly? At any rate, they really should be looked at as two separate projects. The only concern I've heard from Mr. Brown was that as a single project, it's too expensive. Maybe, then they could certainly be done independently of one another. And solve some very serious problems in that neck of the woods. The center half, the southerly half of the borough's part of the borough is below the Parks Highway. And right now, we're talking about interconnectivity. If you start at the south trunk and you go all the way to where the Parks Highway actually crosses the, does that mean I'm done talking?
You can finish your thought.
Okay. If you go all the way to where the Parks Highway crosses the railroad, it's almost 10 miles. There are, so far as I can tell, 4 options to depart, or 5, I guess, to depart the Parks Highway to go to the south half of the heart of the borough. And in 2 cases, 2 of them come together before they actually get anywhere. The third one is the Clap Road, which I'm not very familiar with. And there's only one in that entire 10-mile stretch that's above grade.
Thank you, sir.
Whereas, you know, little towns like Anchorage are proud of the fact that they have half-mile east-west and half-mile north-south connectivity. And as I recall, back in the day, even that was considered to be terrible traffic for folks up here.
Thank you, sir.
That's what we like to see. If you can split them and incorporate them, I don't believe the costing, on the on-grade access costing makes no sense, particularly since the DOT and the railroad are not interested.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll be happy to answer
Is-
any questions.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to PC Resolution 22-13? Thank you, sir. You'll have 3 minutes. We don't have the big timer. Maybe you want to tell them when there's 30 seconds left? Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Bill Klebesadel, K-L-E-B-E-S-A-D-E-L. I'll introduce more of my credentials later because I'm speaking on another topic, but I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Tucker had to say. When I served at the Matsu Borough, we had somewhat different perspectives for how to relieve the Nelson Road, the ranch access, but the fullness of time, Mr. Tucker is very familiar with that area, and the growth is happening there. They're continuing to build out in the ranch, and the ideas Mr. Tucker has of relieving congestion over on the west side are very well founded. The cost of the Seward Meridian extension down to Fairview would be very costly, but the railroad is eventually trying to eliminate, there we go, all at-grade intersections. So with 2 routes out of the ranch, you'll see they're coming across all the way over to the Fairview corner. Eventually, you could eliminate that really funky is the only term I can come up for that Matanuska spur and Fairview intersection right at the base of the farm there. It's a pretty nasty one now. By extending Nelson Road up there through the gravel pits that are currently valley block and concrete along the edge there, it's mostly mined out. So what they're doing is hauling material in, putting in valley block concrete trucks and hauling it out. So they have the 2 developers, Klondike Concrete and Valley Block, years ago developed a master plan for what's called Sweeping Vista Subdivision. That is pretty much everything you see there, the gravel pit to the west of the ranch. And that could have 200 new homes in there, half-acre lots with city water. So to plan for congestion now, that's important to get a western access for Nelson Road up to Fairview. That's really all I had to say on that. We studied it quite a bit back then, had a number of alignments. I'm trying to remember the firm. We studied the Seward Meridian overpass and extension out to Fairview. So there are documents that have been generated, but it's important, Mr. Tucker, that the growth is happening there right now and fairly quickly.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to Resolution PC 22-13? Is there anyone online? All right. Is there any objection to closing the public hearing? Hearing and seeing none, public hearing is closed. I'll now entertain a motion for PC Resolution 22-13. Don't all jump at once.
I'll move a motion.
All right, Commissioner Scoggin moves the motion. Commissioner Glenn?
I'll second that.
All right. So PC Resolution 22-13 has been moved by Commissioner Scoggins, seconded by Commissioner Glenn. Commissioner Scoggin, any comments? Commissioner Glenn? Any other commissioner comments on PC Resolution 22-13? Commissioner Kendig?
No comments.
Thank you. All right. Is there any opposition to approving PC Resolution -22-13? An extra dash in there. Commissioner Kendig, any objection?
No objection.
All right, as such, PC Resolution 22-13 passes. On to PC Resolution 22-18. Mr. Strawn. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alex Strawn, I'm the Planning Director for the Borough. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing the Subdivision Construction Manual update. And just so for those who aren't familiar with this document, 2 years ago it was updated, but previous to that, it hadn't been updated since either 91 or 93, I believe. And so we took a pretty old archaic document that I think at the time was a really good document, but as time went on, we became a little bit more sophisticated. In 2020, there was a major lift. Many meetings were held. There's a lot of negotiation between developers and engineers and surveyors and government officials and all sorts of types of people to do this incredible lift to update and do an overhaul of the Subdivision Construction Manual. That was adopted in 2020. And then after living with that document for a year or so, a year or two, it was recognized by both Public Works Department here at the borough, as well as members of the industry who are building roads and actually developing subdivisions, that some changes needed to occur. And so the members of the private sector reached out to Assemblymember Rob Yunt, who through the manager requested that I put a working group together to update the manual. And so we did that. The working group consisted of 2 developers, a land surveyor, 2 engineers representing private sector, and then an engineer, Jamie Taylor, who works for the borough, and myself, who's basically facilitating the conversation. Members in the private sector sort of came to the table with some asks for changes, and then our Public Works Department also came to the table with some asks that they had been hoping to make change as well. There was negotiation, there was debate, there was give and take, but the vast majority of the changes that were brought to the table, everybody agreed on and is represented within this document. I'm going to go over just a summary of the changes. It's actually in the staff report. If you haven't read that, I'm just going to go ahead and go over some of these. So we did general cleanup and clarification. We updated some acronyms and some definitions. We removed a number of lots and length restrictions on residential streets before it becomes a residential sub-collector. Modified standards for turnarounds and paved aprons. And one of the themes was, if you have a standard, you have to be able to sort of justify it. And if there's really not a justification for it, we're going to take it out. Or if there's something that's working and there's sort of a motion to change it, you have to kind of have justification as to why you're going to change it. So there's a lot of logic and reasoning and a lot of engineer talk at these meetings. So we clarified compaction standards and added requirements for testing methods. One of the things that Public Works has run into is there's a lot of different ways you can take measurements that will give you different results. And so this sort of standardized the measurements and how they're collected. Same with rainfall data. We require that the rainfall data that's provided comes from the NOAA, or National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Before this change, what's been going on is we've been getting rainfall data from a variety of different sources, which can give you different results. So this sort of standardizes it. A big one is we allowed allowing developers to put drainage facilities within utility easements. So the language that's in there that allows this was developed in conjunction with Matanuska Electric Association. So they helped actually craft the language as well as endorse it and think it's okay. I have notified all the other utility companies who do work within our utility easements of these changes, requesting comments if they have any, and I have not heard any at this point. Modified standards for water quality associated with treatment of runoff. So this one is, I'll talk later about some dialogue that's in the back of the packet between Department of Public Works as well as engineer representing private sector. We modified downstream evaluation and mitigation criteria for flood hazards, added requirements to the flood bypass design requirements, added standards for ditch stabilization, added a minimum freeboard for all ditches, added culvert gauge standards, added energy dissipation requirements at culvert outlets, added soil infiltration facility standards. So this is another one that's a point of contention, and I'll get into it and just after I do this summary here. And then added pre-approved runoff calculation methods, modified warranty timeframes to work better for both Department of Public Works and developers, added inspection deadline for subdivision agreements, removed appendices, for example, construction plan and paving special provisions. So like I said, for the most part, there was absolute agreement on these different standards that are in this change. There are a couple of issues that were not completely agreed upon by the group that are outlined in two different documents. One is a memo by Department of Public Works, which is just before the reso on page 287 of 304. And I can dive into those a little bit. One is for runoff calculations. The existing standard is that the runoff from the first flush, the first quarter inch of runoff from the development gets treated essentially. Whereas the change that's made is they're required to treat the first half inch of rainfall. And it seems kind of like a minor change, but there's logic for doing either way. The first half inch of rainfall is the 90th percentile, which is typically the industry standard. In a lot of cases, there will be calculations done that show that there's zero runoff from a half inch rainfall. And so there'd be no treatment of runoff for that. Whereas in the existing standard, you'd treat first quarter inch no matter what. In some cases, it will actually be more stringent where depending on the type of soil that's on site, you may be treating more than what would be resulted from a half inch or from a more than quarter inch of rainfall. And I'm getting a little bit over my head here. I do have Jamie to back me up here or other people who are involved in the room that can speak to this. But I think one of the half inch rainfall, the 90th percentile, was based on an acreage standard. And there is a big difference between acreage and out here in the valley. Acreage has smaller lots and a lot more impervious surface. We don't really know what the future land use is going to be or how much impervious surface is going to be on a site when it's being developed as a subdivision. So we're at a little bit of a disadvantage there. I'm not going to weigh in either side, considering I'm not an engineer or a road constructor on that one. Just know that there is still debate and it's unresolved. Right now, the sponsor of the ordinance, Assemblymember Yunt, asked that the half inch rainfall standard be kept in the document, and that's what's in there right now. The Department of Public Works did suggest that best management practices be incorporated into this document, reflecting the the Alaska Pollution Discharge Elimination System. That's sort of voluntary as it is right now. And then another point of contention was right now there's no standards for soil infiltration facilities that are in this document other than an EPA injection well can't be created with a soil infiltration facility. At the very beginning of this process, the private sector did bring forward standards for soil infiltration facilities that reflect some standards that are found in AASHTO guidelines. But those were eliminated in this process. They were in there and then they were eliminated. So Department of Public Works is suggesting that those standards be put back into this document. And so this has been reviewed by the Transportation Advisory Board. They did postpone a decision. They're going to meet again in the near future to actually potentially adopt a resolution. So the resolution, was that a signed reso? Okay, so that, I believe that reso is talking about the process, but they are going to meet at their next meeting to talk about the merits of these changes.
It does address the changes. It was May 23rd. Oh, it was in our folder.
It's Transportation Advisory Board? Okay, okay, great. The LURSA board, or the Local Road Service Area Advisory Big Board is what it's known as, also has reviewed this, but hasn't adopted a resolution, and they intend to do that at a date in the near future. They have concerns about things that were not addressed in the previous effort 2 years ago, such as they are hoping, what it seems like a lot of the members are hoping to require a maximum of like 12-inch lifts for construction of roads, but that was not part of this effort. It was not discussed as part of this effort. So that's kind of an overview. This document is going to the Assembly at the second meeting of July for public hearing. I guess with that, you have a resolution in the back of your packet, and if you want to see changes, we can probably work through what you want to see. I'll answer questions.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Strong? Seeing none on the commission, Commissioner Kendig?
No questions.
All right, he has no questions. Thank you, Mr. Strong. I will now open the public hearing on Resolution PC 22-18. Each person will have 3 minutes to discuss this and state your opinion. At the beginning, please state your name and spell your last name.
Gary LaRusso, LORUSSO, Keystone Surveying. I was going to start out by mentioning all the committees and groups that I've been in the borough for 30 years, 40 years. I know Towers Group and all that, but I'm not going to do that. So I was on the first construction manual group, and I was also on this rewrite. And so were these folks who are experts in their field. And I think it would be beneficial. There aren't a lot of people in the room. Everyone that's in here is professional. If you would suspend the rules so that instead of the 3-minute speech format, which doesn't answer questions very well, if you would suspend the rules to allow a back and forth with questions, it would probably be beneficial to the Planning Commission. That format's worked really well before at the Planning Commission and at different boards. So I would ask that you do that so it would give a better overview. And that's it.
Thank you. We have a sign-up sheet, or was it empty? Or it was empty. It was empty. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to, Mr. Klebesattel?
Thank you. Again, my name is Bill Klebesattel. You want me to spell it again? Anyway, I also like Mr. LaRusso's idea of if you wanted us up here at the table, we could discuss back and forth various ideas. Until then, very briefly, my history with road construction. In 1982, I started with the Department of Transportation Highway Construction Section, served 24 years there, then worked 4 years as a project management and engineering director, effectively what's capital projects now, before it got dissolved and assimilated into public works. And then another 5 years with the city of Wasilla as our deputy public works director. So I've got a lot of experience with road construction directly. And since I left the borough in 2010, the last 22 years, I've been involved in the basically the subdivision construction process from the private side, bringing the roads to the borough for acceptance. So having briefly that history, I just got bifocals a week ago, so I'm adjusting slowly. So up until 2009, the current cross-section for Borough Road is scrape off what's there now, and if it looks competent, then you add 1.5 foot of non-frost susceptible material. Now that's the important part, is 1.5 foot, and then 6 inches of surfacing that's high in fines and binder that'll hold up. But underneath, again, it's whatever was there. Usually not muskeg, you're not building on that, but the state has had to do that before, and the vast majority of failures are from subgrade, not what the road is built out of. So again, worst roads in the valley were actually, I experienced those in Mission Hill Subdivision, the city of Wasilla, because that was built on muskeg. It doesn't matter what you build the road out of, the subgrade is what's going to fail, whether through permafrost, through swampy material. The worst roads in the state are probably north of McKinley Park, the swampy permafrost area up to Nenana, or out towards Toke, the Richardson Highway. No matter what the state builds those roads out of, great material, you still have it heaving from the subgrade. So I don't mean to downplay what the roads are built out of, but the vast majority of failures are not from what we build the roads out of. So during the latest rewrite, 30 seconds, we proposed lessening the restriction for the 1.5 foot material to go from 0 to 6% on the -200, that if it makes it non-frost susceptible. We suggested relaxing that more to the B standard to allow 10% of fines in that, because that's what these roads are built out of. They're being slit trenched from on-site material. To required non-frost susceptible material goes to virtually quadrupling the cost of these subdivision roads. These are all residential roads. Whenever they become an arterial, they're reconstructed and new material is imported. But to make these subdivision roads cost effective, I recommend the 0 to 10% on the, the embankment that's being imported. And that was one of the questions with the new manual. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cletus-Settle. Commissioner Scuggen?
Who, the 0 to 10%, is that the borough doesn't like that, or is it?
Correct. I've heard the borough does not like that. That was proposed by our working group back in, when did we start this? 2.5 years ago.
40 years ago.
Yeah, it was proposed 2.5 years ago, and very little was said up until very recently. And so that's why I came here to support this. With the history I have with roads, what you want is something uniform. So whatever you can get from these on-site, either the lots or, I hate to use the word slit trenching, we call it linear gravel extraction within the right-of-way. What we've done to try to control that so it's not underneath the road, so it doesn't cause problems in the future. It's out at the edge of the right-of-way. In any event, what you find on site is what you're going to build the road out of. And if it has a little too high fines in it, then we're rejecting it and basically rejecting the subdivision, that they couldn't build it. Or
Thank you.
it would put it out of the range. Sorry.
Any other questions for Commissioner Cletus-Settle?
I had a quick question.
Okay, let's keep the response to the question asked.
Sure. I'm sorry.
This is a, a very simple one, sir. I know that it sounds like there was a lot of give and take and debate when you came up with this, but in the end, I mean, would you have us adopt 2218? Is it your recommendation that we do that? Is it on balance? Is it a good document?
I would have to defer to Mr. LaRusso. He's read that a lot better than me. I have not read it in its entirety. I just really came to speak about the one aspect of the material in the road construction.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry if I got off track there.
Happens to the best of us. Is there anyone else like to speak to PC Resolution 22-18? You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and spell your last name. Your microphone's not on. Watch for the green light.
Kurt Holler, Holler. I'll, for a third time, ask if it's possible to suspend the rules and have it a little less formal. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, so I had a few thoughts. I did see some comments about just 10%. That's my one item for tonight is a 10%, 6%. We all agreed after working on it for a couple of years, that 10% was reasonable. And that was from the excavators, the engineers, developers. If you make it harder to build that road or more expensive to build that road, you're changing what's going to get built on those lots, or you're changing the size of those lots. So you are shaping what's coming at you down the road, and you're going to have more multifamily, more multi-level. That's just going to happen. Somebody has to pay for building the road and making that lot. Trying to get clean pit run sand and gravel in the South Big Lake area or most of Willow, it's difficult to find. These subdivision projects, many of them are only feasible if you can build it out of on-site materials. Has been said before, and I agree with that. For the record, yes, I think you should support the resolution as it's written right now with the 10% in it. The 6% was a change that we had already addressed last time, so I don't like the 6%. Frost susceptibility. One of the comments I read said that if you get over 6%, you're going to have moderate to extreme frost susceptibility, which I disagree with completely. It's way, way more complicated than that. It has to do with the size and shape of the silt particles that are there, and actually sometimes from what their origin was, whether they're organic in origin, wind deposited, or if they're ground up gray dirt like we have. So if you think down KGB Road, all the roads down there that are older than a few years old were built out of the background material, 25-30% silt, and they work fine. It works because the material, that gray material stuff, honestly isn't that frost susceptible. The brown stuff is the stuff you got to watch when you try to mix topsoil, the brown topsoils with the gravel and make your topping. And some of those projects that had 5 or 6% in there had actual soils that were actually frost susceptible. Now I'm with Bill. I think the issues you're seeing on existing paved roads have more to do with the base of it. I've done something between 125 and 150 road sign-offs in the last 10 years. Many of them are paved, and I have to drive through that same subdivision to go to the new one I'm working on now. And I'm just not seeing this going on with the cracking and the heaving in my subdivisions. Check that stuff. You know, there's a whole process that got started 10 years ago that Bill helped set up. So I will happily answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to Resolution PC 22-18? Hearing and seeing none. Is there anybody online? No one online. All right, Mr. Strawn. I guess, let's see, is there any objection to closing public hearing? Commissioner Kendig? All right, we will assume that's no objection. The public hearing is closed. Mr. Strawn, do you have any responses to the public comments or the questions that were brought up?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I guess I will say that a lot of the discussion was regarding the percentage of fines within the sub base of the road. that has not been changed with this document. That is the same as it was back in 2020. So there was some discussion in the group, but nothing was changed as a result of it.
Ms. Taylor, is a representative of Public Works, does Public Works have an opinion as they'll ultimately be responsible for these roads?
Thank you, Chair. We brought it up at the committee meeting, and I guess ultimately it was a fight that Public Works didn't have the stamina for. So I think that we are getting decent quality roads with what is spec'd right now, and as long as it's consistent throughout, linearly throughout the road alignment, I think it will be fine with the 0 to 10% on the fines.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Commissioner Kendig?
No questions.
Thank you. All right, I will now entertain a motion for Resolution PC 22-18.
I'll move for the adoption of Resolution 22-18.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Allen.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn. As the maker, Commissioner Allen, any comments?
I'm not going to pretend that I understand everything in Resolution 2218. I think we all bring different things to the table. I think I've followed along, but I have tremendous faith in the experts at the borough who have spent a lot of time working on this and studying it, and I have no reason not to support it. So that's my honest assessment.
Thank you, Commissioner Glenn.
No comment.
All right, would anybody else like to speak to Resolution PC 22-18?
I guess my comment is, we all know how difficult it is to get a gravel pit going in the valley. I mean, it's almost impossible. And if it's 6% now, I'm guessing on the NFS material, bumping it up to 10%, that's not very much. It's not gonna make a big difference. But I mean, in the cost of building these subdivision, if it can be done on site, it's huge. It's enormous. I'm familiar with it a little bit. So that's the only comment I guess I got.
Any other comments? Commissioner Kindig?
No comment.
All right. Hearing no further comments, is there any objection to passing Resolution 22-18 as written? Commissioner Kendig?
No objection.
All right. PC Resolution 22-18 is hereby approved. So, Mr. Ortiz, do you want to do it new business or director comments?
We do a new business, I guess.
All right.
I was, we had talked about, I guess, the idea of doing some training for planning commissioners, some additional training, but not training here, like scheduling on an off day. So we'd still have to advertise for the public, whoever wants to attend, but doing something more informal where we're all together. It would still be advertised for members of the public to attend, but maybe like in a room down, somewhere else where we can do just some training stuff. It's not something that's ever happened. Even when I was on the planning commission at the time, we never did that type of training, but it's something we've talked about doing. And I just wanted to see your guys' thoughts, feedback on that type of training, because it would be an additional day that we would have. It wouldn't be a regular scheduled meeting. And it's not anything now, soon, it could be a couple months out from now, but just wanted to get you guys' feedback on something like that.
Training on
Just
procedure
Sure.
or?
Yeah, procedures, just
Yeah, we used to do planning commissioner training presentations pretty routinely, and for whatever reason, they fell by the wayside a little bit. But we used to come in and talk about the different roles that we play, the different hats that you wear, legislative versus quasi judicial, and then what findings of facts are, what the record is, kind of what your obligations are relating to weighing evidence, just sort of, you know, that type of information. And we have in the past gone over some of the ethics rules, depending on how, you know, interested or not interested people are. We can design it however you guys want. But yeah, so we just thought that might be fun.
Great, thanks. That sounds great.
Instead of a couple months, could it be like 5 or 6?
Yeah,
We're a little busy
I
between
have
now
a-
and November.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Commissioner Kendig.
I'm all in favor of that. I'm thinking we could have it the same day, just earlier before the meeting.
Yeah, good suggestion, Commissioner Kendig. And that's a possibility. So we can, how about we send whatever we send out, we'll send out via email. It'll be included in the packet. So all correspondence members of the public will see our correspondence, but we'll get a feel for dates and see what we can set up. So I just wanted to kind of gauge everyone's interest. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. All right. Are there any upcoming business that you want to point out? Just everybody read the packet.
I believe that was it. Did you have anything else? I believe that was it.
All right. Mr. Ortiz, any closing comments?
No, sir. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
No, thank you.
Ms. Beaudelet? All right, Commissioner Scoggin?
I have a question if that's, some of the group tonight asked if they could suspend the 3-minute rule. I'm not familiar with that. Is that something that sometimes can be done to open up discussion, or is that not?
I guess I can respond. I mean, it's up to the chair on how they want to do that. But it would have to be consistent for everyone is the one thing. So if you suspend it for one, it's going to have to be, kind of opens up what you guys want to do, but that would totally be up to the chair. Agree?
That's true. I think that it would be a motion that the board would have to consider. We haven't done it in a very long time, probably. I mean, I'm just guessing, but it may have been 10 years. And we have used it when there were really large issues in front of the board where they needed to dig into the details or wanted to dig into the details with more individuals than just staff. And so it gave them the opportunity to spend many hours going through things. But you have to do it, according to Robert's rules and get the requisite vote and that kind of thing.
So just follow up on that real quick if I could. So just to be clear, if we were to do something like that, we couldn't just say, okay, so the engineers that happen to be in the room, we're going to have this discussion with you. We'd have to open that up to anybody in the public who wanted to have a back and forth with us at that meeting. That's what the rules require.
Yeah, I mean, I think what the ask was for was to suspend the procedural rule that you have to limit testimony to 3 minutes. And I think you would have to come up with a reasonable, workable procedure that you could use to manage the meeting. But of course, yeah, you would need to have that in mind.
That's correct. Yeah, just one other thing. If anyone were to call in and listening live and just wanted to talk, there would be, you're not going to be able to stop them on timing too. So it would have to be, usually if you're going to introduce something like that, you just extend times or whatever you guys want it to do or you guys agreed upon.
So what you're saying is the chairman could extend the period to 5 minutes or 6 minutes if we wanted to learn some more information. Is that what you're saying? And set a time, but that's his call.
It would be a motion and then
Right.
you guys would agree upon that.
Okay, all right.
Is there a mechanism? Because I haven't been on this commission all that long, but is there a mechanism where somebody can ask to be sort of a special expert guest and be able to, so it wouldn't be public testimony, but they would be an expert guest that we could have a back and forth with? Is that ever done?
Yeah, and this is Jason Ortiz. I'm sorry, we're not saying our names for people that are listening with the Matsu Borough. You absolutely could. If we knew someone in advance, we could probably add them on there, and they can be given a 5-minute time limit. We can easily add them on if we know in advance.
Commissioner Allen, any further comments?
No, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner Kendig, any comments?
No comments.
All right. As the chair, I just want to say that, especially on this matter, I did not see us doing anything productive as a working group with these people. And I didn't feel like it would be fair for the developers, engineers, kind of the development side to have all of their people here and one representative of the borough. They've spent lots and lots of time with lots and lots of meetings, and ultimately I disagree with some of the things that are in there, and it's going to cost taxpayers future problems. But DPW is okay with the concessions that they've gotten, and so we'll run with it. The concern is if we push too hard on any of those things, they'll push back on other things, and in the end, nobody's happy. So I didn't feel, for that matter, that it was appropriate. A couple of questions. Members can always ask questions of somebody that's giving a public testimony. Unless it's really a point of clarification, I try not to do it. But in this case, there's obviously some technical things that people wanted information on. All right, and with that, we are adjourned at 7:17 p.m.